So we have Paul moving... Oh, have I got this back up? We have Paul moving on from Berea, where he was before. Oops, sorry. Moving on from Berea and places where he's been, and moving all the way down the coast now to Athens. And we've got God throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament, explicitly forbidding the making of and worshipping of idols. And we have Paul entering what is sort of the capital city of idolatry in the Greek towns and cities. And these words, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols, kind of set the scene for the whole passage. And we're going to just be looking at, interesting, but what has it got to do with us, and seeing that idols and idolatry are just as much an issue for us as they were in Paul's time? That they are a serious issue for our worship of God and how our lives go, and yet that we are able to see them removed from our lives, rooted out of our lives, and how can we do that, and then how can we bring that good news to others, is what we're going to be talking about today. And just to say, the illustrations I'm using today are all from Angela Wheeler, so just to say a big thank you to Angela for that. So to begin with, what are idols? Idols in their simplest form are statues, images that have been made to represent some kind of god or deity or thing that you're putting your faith in, your worship in. And so there's the golden calf that the Israelites make in the Old Testament. They're trying to represent God in some way, so that they've got something tangible to worship. And God says, stop it, don't do that. Expressly forbids it. But you get all kinds of idols, statues made in the likeness of so-called gods, representing gods, and they're also representing a worldview. They're symbolizing a worldview. So you've got a statue of this deity, this God that you believe in, and it's symbolizing not only that you believe this God exists, but that you believe this God has authority over some kind of area of the universe, that it symbolizes something about how you think life works and what you think life is about and how you think you can get those things. And you're saying that there is behavior and consequences that goes beyond just what we can see and touch. And so we've got this ancient Greek society that is really different to ours. It's a society that it is built in many ways around belief and around rituals that the whole community would be involved in. There's a whole pantheon of gods. There's a whole kind of group of gods that they believe in. There's kind of 12 main gods that they believe in. And then there's a slew of other gods as well. Athens is named after Athena, one of the key Greek gods. But Athens is also this sort of center for bringing in all the idols and all the gods that people have come up with and saying, let's just get them all. Let's get all of them. Let's not miss any out. We want to make the most of them and be representative in our worship. And their society is one that believes in these gods, believes these gods have power over different areas and times and themes. There's Aphrodite, responsible for love and sex and beauty. There's Athena, responsible for reason and wisdom and war, and Ares, the kind of more bloodthirsty side of war. There's Artemis, goddess of the hunt. There's Demeter, responsible for agriculture. Hades, Hermes, lots of different names and gods. Lots of different idols that people are putting their faith and their trust in. And the society would be... in their homes, they might have statues of these, and then out in public places and temples, there are statues of these. Huge temple to Athena in Athens. And so part of the lifestyle of these people is, some of them would believe very strongly, some of them might not believe so much, but all are involved in the ritual. So whether it's rituals that go on in your home, or whether it's the rituals that go on in the community, or the festivals that go on regularly throughout the year, people wouldn't be missing out on these. Even if their faith wasn't strong, yet they want to be part of this. You don't want to be blamed when the harvest fails because you weren't there at the right sacrifice or the right festival. People take these things seriously. And in Athens, they've even got this altar to an unknown god, just in case. just in case. Like, just in case we tried to get as many as we could. We tried to get all the idols, but we may have missed one in our ignorance. Would you forgive us? We're going to try and worship you even in our ignorance. And Paul, looking around at all this, is greatly distressed. In one sense, it's not new to him. He's seeing these idols everywhere he goes, but maybe it's the scale of it. Greatly distresses him. His response to it is to share the gospel. So you might think, well, it's no different to anything else. But he's greatly distressed, and so he reasons with people in the marketplace, in the synagogue, in the Areopagus. And I guess what's going on there is maybe the scale of idolatry in Athens is a pointed reminder for him of what's really going on, of what people have bought into, of what people have been duped by, what people have been fooled by. Because what's behind these statues and beliefs in gods is not just a kind of backwards ignorance. It's not just superstition, but Paul writes elsewhere in 1 Corinthians, he says that actually anyone who makes a sacrifice to an idol, there's evil spiritual powers involved. He says that they're sacrificing to demons. He says there is spiritual truth going on behind all of that. The gods may be a work of fiction, but actually there's supernatural reality behind it that is keeping people in darkness, that is keeping people enslaved. They're looking at these idols, these gods, to provide for them or give them a sense of meaning in life, or to meet their needs, or to help them in all kinds of situations. But in fact, these idols are powerless to truly deliver them, powerless to really save them. And people are being kept blind to the truth, and Paul wants them to see. He wants them to see the truth, that there are not many gods. There's not many gods with all kinds of responsibilities for each of them. There is one God. There is one God who made everything, who made heavens and the earth, the stars and the sun and the moon and people and everything that we see. One God. Well, who's responsible for the wind? That God. Who's responsible for the agriculture? That God. That God. He is in charge of all of it. He wants them to see that there is this one God who is too mighty, too wonderful, too glorious to be represented by some statue, however shiny it might be. He is the one that gives us life. He is the one who can keep us safe now and eternally. He is the one who deserves our worship. He is the one that we have turned away from in sinful rebellion, thinking that we were wiser than him. And he is the one who will judge us for our sins. At the same time, he is the one that we must turn to for forgiveness. Jesus, who gave up his life, who took God's judgment for our sins in our place, so that we could be forgiven, so that relationship could be restored. And all of this he has given proof of by raising Jesus from the dead. And what Paul longs for these dear people to know is that it's as true today as it was then. What Paul longs for these dear people to know is that truth, and it is as true today as it was then. I wonder what Paul's reaction would be if he were to come to Great Yarmouth. It's kind of interesting to see that you look around and there's at least 5 or 6 businesses, buildings in the area that are named after Greek gods. So there's Demeter House and Artemis House, Apollo Tavern, Zeus IT, there's Aphrodite Beauty Studio and Hermes Gallery, and there's a Poseidon Warehouse. It's just, these things have got staying power. He would remark on that, I'm sure. Athens was unique in its time, and still it's a stunning place, even in the parts of it that are in decline, or kind of in ancient ruins and things. It's certainly more showy than Great Yarmouth. It was certainly more of a center for gathering idols than Yarmouth is. We live in a different place. I love this town. It's beautiful in different ways. If you saw the photography display that was out there at the start of the year that Joe and the folks that had been in her discipleship group had put together, beautiful sights to be seen around here. And it may be that it's not a place that's full of statues of gods, but it's no less a place that's full of idols. Because people wherever they are, in whatever culture, are idol-making machines. And whether it's statues or not, we're made to worship. We're made to look for things to worship. If we're not worshipping the one who is worthy of being worshipped, we'll find ourselves worshipping something else. Whether it's Taylor Swift, or whether it's your favorite sports team, or whether it's yourself, we'll find something to worship. So for most Greeks, they've got this really clear sense that there's a divine reality that underpins the universe. There are gods. Of course there are gods. Of course there's gods that can have a say and can zap us if we get things wrong and wreck the harvest and influence our lives and all of that. Of course there are. And some modern people are deeply religious, but many in our day don't order our lives like that. Many in our day don't assume that there is a higher power that they might have to give account to. Of course there isn't. Many don't think that traditions or rituals, even if they've been passed down from their families, don't think they should be binding on them. Many don't assume that there is one correct way to live in the universe, which is why you'll hear people saying things like, all religions are basically the same, aren't they? Or you do you, or do whatever works for you. And people will pick and choose from the rituals that are available, but often not really assuming they've got any kind of fundamental power, but actually it suits me, which is why people will pick and choose yoga and meditation and all kinds of things, and will dabble in spiritual stuff and all kinds of things. Just, that works for me, that works for you, that's fine. Where are the idols in a society like that? For many, if there's not a sense of divine truth ordering the universe, like gods to worship and obey, rules to follow, then who decides what truly matters? Well, I do. If there's no divine kind of framework underpinning things, then who decides how I ought to live? I do. And there'll be some framework of these things we agree are criminal, these things should be punished, these things shouldn't be allowed. But within that, there's this broad scope of, I'm going to decide how I live my life. I'm going to decide what matters in my life, what are the goals I'm going to aim for, what determines whether it's a successful life or not. I'm going to determine how I reach those goals. For many, in our culture, the ultimate object of worship is ourselves. Which is why the mantra of many in our culture is, do what feels good to you. Do what feels good, as long as you're not harming anyone. And there'll be sub-idols within that of whether it's sex or whether it's money or whether it's stuff or whether it's your job or whether it's family. There'll be lots of things that we look to give meaning to life and to give shape and to help. But for many of us, it's worshipping ourselves. Tim Keller wrote a great book on this whole topic called Counterfeit Gods. And in that he says, what is an idol? It's anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. So before we start thinking about how we can share the gospel with others, we want to first confront ourselves and ask ourselves, how much have we been taken in by the culture that we live in? How much of that have we drunk in for ourselves? And it's subtle, because it's not always the extremes of someone's not going to be happy unless they're a millionaire. It can be subtle to work out what these things are. It's often good things that God has made, but that we've put in the wrong place or we've made too important. So it could be someone who wants a sense of their life being meaningful, and so because of whatever combination of things, they feel like work is the way that's going to be expressed. My life has meaning if my work is fruitful and makes a difference in the world and gives me a sense of worth in myself. And so if someone's come to believe that, then there'll be sacrifices along the way. There will be a cost to family. There'll be a cost to perhaps their body as they don't look after themselves because they work too long hours, or when they lose their job, or when work's not going well, then they're crushed because that's where they're deriving all their self-worth. Or you could have someone who actually their work's not really an idol for them. They just want enough to live on. Like, I'll do any job. I just want to be able to provide for my family. They'll work hard, but in their working and what they're looking to provide, they're really just looking to themselves. I think God would say, you've made an idol of yourself. Because we talked about work a while back, didn't we? A couple of months ago, looking at radical simple discipleship, and God created work, and it's a good thing. We're to work hard, we're to make use of the gifts and the skills and the bodies that God's given us, the time He's given. So we're meant to work, but as we work, and we work to earn a living and to provide for families and to provide for the community, as we work, we're looking in part to ourselves, but mostly to God. Actually, it's God that's going to provide. And if this job is taken away from me, God will provide. And if I'm unable to work for some reason, God will provide. Whereas in the modern day, there's plenty of people who there's no sense of God will provide, and all that you're left with is, well, I'll look to myself then. So lots of the Disney movies, actually, the realization comes to the character that strength was inside them all along. You don't need to look to some other power. The strength was in you. Needed to believe in yourself more. And the gospel is, no, you need to use what God's given you, but you need to believe in God most of all. Believe what He says about you, that you're a child of His, that you're strengthened as you wait on Him. So these are subtle things to work out, but there are questions that we can ask. What truly governs our lives? Is it that God made everything? Is it that He is the one that's marked out the times for us to live in, the boundaries of our lives? Is it that He deserves our undivided praise? That what's best for us is that His will would be done and that we'd be living to hear Him say, well done to us? Or is it equally important to us to have that house or that car or that job, or this person's respect, or that person's affection, or that experience, or my life on my terms? Some questions we can ask ourselves. Is there anything where I will disobey God in any way in order to get one of those things that I want? Are there desires or things in your life where it's so important to you that you're willing to disobey what you know God has said in order to have it? It may be an idol. Where are the things that I turn to when I'm in need? What are the things that, when there are deep needs in my life, what's the first place that I look? And for some, it may be supernatural. It might be to some God or other. It might be to some kind of supernatural means. You might go to a fortune teller or something. For some, it will be actually what I need is comfort, and to get it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go after sex on my terms, or I'm going to look to food, first of all, chocolate and ice cream, or I'm going to look to, I need a break. What am I going to do? I'm going to spend a load of time just on the PlayStation, or watching Netflix, or burying my head in the sand. And some of those can be okay things, but it's when they're the first place that we go that they become a problem. Now, ice cream may be somewhere in the picture, but it shouldn't be the first stop. Turning to God. Are these things idols in our lives? And then again, are our emotions kind of really heightened around certain things compared to others? Are there things in your life where actually you know that if that thing was taken away, that would be it? Or that would devastate you? Or are there things where maybe you've got a spouse or a friend and you can see something in your life and you're like, I know that's not quite right, and I feel like I ought to challenge it, but man, I know if I challenge it, it's just going to blow up. Because these are really touchy. Like there's things that have just got such a tight hold on someone's identity or who they are that there's something more going on than simply it being important to them. It's not that the answers will always indicate worship, but they may. It's worth asking those questions. And the answer, like Paul says, is to remind ourselves as the one who really can do all these things for us, the one who really does deserve worship, the one that we can worship, and it's like, it's never too much worship. It's never more than he deserves. It's never more than we ought to. The one who really can meet our needs, the one who really can provide for every last need that we have. The one who can comfort us, the one who can give us, the one who can lift us up and give us strength. And then as well, to look to Jesus. And how Jesus, you might recall the story if you've read it, of as he began his ministry, led out into the wilderness and tempted by the enemy. And there's temptation that comes his way to get good things on his own terms. Tempted to get comfort, bread when he's incredibly hungry, or to get honor and glory, or to get the assurance of his Father's love for him, to get all these things on his own terms, rather than waiting for God's good timing. And Jesus' response at every turn to that is to say, no. I know what the Word says. I know what my Father's like. I know I can trust him. I don't need these things. However good they might be, I'll wait till they're given at the proper time. All of them were given at the proper time. Jesus would eat again. He would be glorified and honored. He would be assured of his Father's love for him, but it's on God's terms. Even if it led him through the cross, the pain and the agony of all that he had in store for him, Jesus was willing to go his Father's way because he knew that's where true satisfaction will be found. He's the example we want to follow, and it's as we see him doing that and we see that worked out in our lives that we start to see, actually, compared to him, all this other stuff is so small. Darren was talking about God getting bigger in your sight, and compared to God, all this other stuff just looks small. But can I work hard enough to provide for my family? I know I can't. Not without God's help. I'm too small. Can sex deliver on those promises? Can PlayStation deliver on those promises? Can work? Can any of that other stuff? It can't. It's too small. We need a bigger view of God. And as we see him, as we see these idols, we see how shallow they are, how incapable of delivering on the false promises they make. And the more that we see that, the more that we get, like Paul, rightly distressed by the idols that other people are giving themselves to. And rightly desiring to see other people turning from those idols to see Jesus as Lord, the one who can satisfy them. And looking to help give those answers to people who are kind of groping in the darkness, looking for God, though he's not far from them. But they need people who are willing to share that good news with them. And so Paul, he goes to the synagogue and the marketplace and the Areopagus, and some of those folks are believing strongly in these gods, and some are a bit more philosophical, and Paul's finding a common ground with them so that he can argue for God, but he's not starting at like complete odds with them. He's looking for somewhere where actually they're in agreement with him as he begins his talk. He's making it just as straightforward as possible to share the gospel. So if we were to go into the Great Yarmouth marketplace and look to share the gospel, we probably wouldn't be saying, like Paul, I see that in every way you are very religious. It's probably not an accurate description of the majority of people who are going to be there. There'll be some, but it might be that the people you're talking to, the way in is, hey, I see that you value honesty and integrity. It might be that people of Yarmouth or people of this club that I'm part of, I see that you value justice and fairness, or I see that you value hard work. Like Paul, there's wisdom in beginning where there's common ground, and yet not shying back from the truth. Because at some point the gospel will diverge from the common ground. So if you're speaking to people and actually, do you know what the common ground here is that these people are for justice. They're for seeing people's rights championed, whether that's like social classes being brought onto a level playing field, or whether it's racial inequality and wanting to see those things challenged, and where we can say, these are good, I see that you are passionate about these things, and that's a good thing. And you can tie that into how God made us, that actually God says that we're made in his image. That's the reason that people deserve justice and equality, regardless of who they are and where they've come from. That's something that comes from God. And it's something that I really value seeing in you. I want to honor that. And yet being able to say, do you know what? And at the same time, we're all answerable to God. Not just those out there who are causing injustice and inequality, but we're all answerable to our Creator for our sin. And so in every way, we want to be gracious and winning and loving and caring and understanding. So important that we do that well. Not just coming in kind of bluntly hammering away at people, but looking to understand them and relate to them. At the same time, it's got to be the whole gospel. At some point, we are going to provoke a reaction in people. Whether it's someone responding in outrage at what we might believe, whether it's some people saying, I need to think about that. Can we talk more about this? Whether it's the joy of the new believer. For the real gospel to come through, it's got to provoke that reaction. It's got to get beyond just common ground into the places where it diverges. And then for us, where will that happen? It's probably not quite the same as for Paul. So he's fruitfully in the synagogue, but he's got access there mainly because he's from Jewish background. And also the closest synagogue to us is in Norwich, which is inconvenient. And then the marketplace back then is different to the marketplace now. It's a place in ancient Greek culture that's like buying and selling and trade, but also it is intentionally a place for coming together and chat and sharing ideas and things in a way that Great Yarmouth Marketplace isn't really. And then the same, the Areopagus is like a place of intellectually curious people coming together to share ideas and talk about things. And I don't know where that is in Yarmouth. I couldn't find any debate clubs that were open to people turning up, and maybe we need to start some. But there's questions that we might want to ask. 3 things I want to suggest to us. Firstly, pray that your life would be a witness. Secondly, to take the opportunities that come your way. And thirdly, to consider how we can get to know some more people. 3 simple things. So, first of all, praying and asking that God would help us to live our lives as a witness. So for all that God says, not to make idols, not to make images of God, He has placed images of God in the world. And they look like us. He's made us in His image. And when we get life right, we're meant to represent God and His kingdom to people who don't know Him yet. To one another and to those who don't know Him yet. He has placed us in the world as His representatives. And we want to pray together and regularly that God would set us free from idols, that we would know Him better and enjoy Him more, and that we would represent Him well. So we want to pray for that. Second, we want to take the opportunities that come our way. So whether that might be those conversations that take a surprise turn, like, oh, now we're talking about spiritual realities, are we? Okay, well, I've got something to say about that. Or whether it's those conversations where you recognize that I've got a moment here, a choice to take things in one of 2 different directions. And we could go on talking about some, whatever it might be, or there is an opportunity here to speak about how God speaks into this situation. Actually, yes, the world is very broken, and I believe it's because of sin and because of our turning from God, and yet there is hope in all of that. And that's not every conversation, and you shouldn't force it into every conversation, but being led by God in that. What are the opportunities He has us take? If someone's unwell or stressed or struggling, whether we offer to pray or whether we show mercy, how can I help? What can I do? Whether it's the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons who turn up at your door looking for a conversation, we've got good conversations we can have with them rather than just turning them away. Show them, tell them that you have a living, active relationship with God. Offer to pray for them. Might be that some of you need to consider the Up Urban Planting course that we've been talking about recently. Just to deliberately be investing in this, considering this, how we can learn to share the gospel well in our community. And just to say, Lynn and Julia, I know, are considering it, so you wouldn't be on your own, but to pray about that. And last, considering how we can get to know some more people. Simply opening our lives up to more potential for us to be witnesses. And it might be a change of routine, having a lunch break, or who you have a lunch break with, or spending time eating with others. It might be deliberate stuff, taking time to spend time with family, friends. Might be there are idols that need to get pushed aside in order to make time for that. But I was going to invite Catherine up to come and share a little bit about what's been going on with the Thursday Tots group.